So thank you for giving me this opportunity to present our work here. My name is Namki from Yonsei University, Seoul, Korea, and I'm an endocrinologist who treats rare endocrine disease. And the title of my talk is Improvement of Digital Phenotyping Performance by SNOMED CT for Rare Endocrine Disease, the RED-CDM study. So this study was supported by the Korean National Industry Development Institute, KIDI. And the contents are like this. Let me go through briefly. So the rare disease can be defined as the domestic prevalence under 20,000 or an unidentified prevalence due to difficulties in diagnosis. And typically, the characteristics of rare disease is clinical madness and consuming heavy medical resources and low profit, so it requires intervention from public sectors usually. So it has requires long-term monitoring and treatment across the lifelong period, and usually it is hard to diagnose because it is a rare endocrine disease, and sometimes it is manageable if correctly diagnosed, but the condition, if correctly diagnosed, is not a easy problem because usually takes 7.6 years to get the right diagnosis for these patients, mostly due to the lack of information in both parts of healthcare providers and patients. So in order to overcome this limitation, we used a claim database source or multi-center registry data to make some fact sheet or guidelines, but it is obviously insufficient to get improved quality of management. And the focusing on real-world evidence is now a giant move in the nationwide policymakers. So they're now focusing on real-world evidence. So we thought that the common data model platform could be one suitable core module for multi-center rare endocrine disease research to improve the patient care. So the goal of this study was to construct CDM-based open platform for multi-center research for endocrine rare disease, and with collaboration with Carrier Network in Korean Endocrine Society-centered multi-center extension, we tried to revise the endocrine rare disease fact sheet with facilitation of domestic international research network. We chose as in starting diseases, we targeted 4 disorders, including medullary thyroid carcinoma, hypoparathyroidism, pheochromocytoma paraganglioma, or hypophosphatemia, because we already had some operational definitions based on ICD-10 codes for these diseases. And then we tried to improve the digital phenotyping from that operational definition. So this is brief introduction of our RED-CDM current status. We had 75 persons in our database with roughly 3 million base occurrence from 2005 to 2020 in Severance Hospital database. And after mapping this database with some mapping rules using SNOMED CTRX norm or LOINC, after extract, transform, and load process, some drug has been mapped under 50%, but it has not been a problem for our project because the drug that we needed were mapped perfectly in this database. So otherwise, we had more than 90% mapping status. So you can pursue more items here. And the major barrier to ensure the accuracy of digital phenotyping for rare endocrine disease was a too wide scope of diagnosis codes, particularly based for ICD-10. Usually many institutions have a database based on ICD-10. So if we want to target medullary thyroid carcinoma as a one subtype of thyroid cancer, we can target C73, malignant tumor of thyroid gland, but this is too wide for medullary thyroid carcinoma because the most of subtypes for thyroid cancer is papillary thyroid carcinoma. And for the example for pheochromocytoma, this is just one subtype of adrenal gland benign neoplasm coded as D35.0. So starting with D35.0 would not precisely pick the pheochromocytoma. It contains other concepts for cortisol-producing adenoma or aldosterone-producing adenoma. So it was our one major barrier for this project. So we thought two solutions, maybe proper phenotypic constraints could help to narrow down the concept, and using SNOMED-CT instead of ICD-10 codes if the available institution could be one option, and the hybrid strategy could be possible. So for the starting point, these four diseases, we had luckily had operational definition coined by Korean Endocrine Society expert consensus meeting. So this provide a good starting point, and you can see the map for distribution of these patients in Korea in this site. And we went through this digital phenotyping improvement process. First, we started with ICD-10 based original definition, and then with some phenotypic constraints derived from experts' consensus meeting, we made cohort for four diseases. And each one by one in Severance Hospital database, the experts reviewed whether these records are true patients' disease status or not. And then we see the positive predictive value of that cohort. And then we move on to modified definition based on ICD-10 with modified phenotypic constraints derived from the manual review process, because expert consensus provides ideal phenotypic constraints for the patients, but usually in real world, sometimes it might not work because the practice pattern is a little bit deviated from the ideal practice pattern. So we reflected that modified phenotypic constraints for the modified definition cohort. And then again, we checked positive predictive value for this modified cohort. And last, we substituted ICD-10 based relevant concept ID to SNOMED-CT based relevant ID to narrow down the starting point, because we had local term for the diagnosis of rare endocrine diseases. And then we underwent modified phenotypic constraints to get the cohort. So basically we get 3 cohorts for for each disease. So a total of 12 cohorts were yielded. So this is one example of pheochromocytoma paraganglioma cohorts. So it starts with ICD-10 based original definition, and then you can see the red characters here to revise the constraints, phenotypic constraints. And then for the last cohorts, SNOMED-CT based modified definition, we substituted ICD-10 codes, including D35.1, D44.1, 44.7, etc., to include pheochromocytoma paraganglioma specific SNOMED-CT term, relevant concept ID. So this is the number of ICD-10 based diagnosis and relevant concept ID numbers. For medullary thyroid carcinoma, it is over 200, and it can be narrowed down by using SNOMED-CT to grab the rare endocrine disease concept. It can be narrowed down to 10, and for other diseases, we can see the similar patterns. And this is the precision recall for each digital phenotyping performance. And as you can see, for medullary thyroid carcinoma, ICD-10 original definition had good precision, but pretty low record. It just captured just 10% of overall patients, but it has been significantly improved by modification of the phenotypic constraints with the well-balanced precision recall between precision recall. And usually for other diseases, including medullary thyroid carcinoma, hypoparathyroidism, hypophosphatemia, ICD-10 modified cohort and SNOMED-CT modified cohort had similar performance and balance between precision recall. So it was good. And for the pheochromocytoma and paraganglioma, specifically, SNOMED-CT modified cohort performed better than ICD-10 based cohorts. So this is one example that we can look into when the SNOMED-CT based cohort work better than ICD-10 based cohort, particularly in case of rare disease. So after confirming the performance of each digital phenotyping. We plotted some numbers across the years and the age groups, and now we are planning to merge more multi-center data into this study, including more than 10 centers in Korea, and hopefully we can get more data and share the data at the end of the year for you guys. And the ongoing project is multi-center validation and proof of concept multi-center study to yield more detailed prognosis of these rare endocrine diseases. So this is a long and winding road even for patients and even for researchers and clinicians, but I think CDM could provide very valuable tool for overcoming these obstacles for all the care providers here. I'd like to especially thank for principal investigators, Yumiri and Shingon Kim, and the Kyuseo Kim did all the jobs here, and he's the major driver of this project. And I would like to especially thank for Seung-chan Yu, who provided the insights for this whole project, and Korean Endocrine Society and Career Network. Thank you for your attention. I'd like to happy to take any questions.